Mount, O Christ our God, revealing thy glory to thy disciples as far as they could bear it. Let thine everlasting light shine upon us sinners, through the prayers of the Theotokos, O giver of light, glory to thee.
Hi there. Christ is risen. Christos Anesti. My name is Father Athanasios, and I'm the Dean here at the St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Cathedral. I'm your host for Be Transfigured Ministries. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to our second to last Bible study on 1 Corinthians, inspired by the homilies of St. John Chrysostom. That's right, next week is the series finale, and I may have cake next week. So make sure you're here on time. I may have cake next week celebrating 45 hours of Bible study, give or take, on 1 Corinthians. It's been one heck of a 4-year project, but it's coming to a close. So welcome. If you're new, that's okay. Stay. Don't go away. Even though we've only got 2 sessions left, I promise you, you'll still gain something for your spiritual life tonight. I promise you. Because St. John Chrysostom inspires us to amazing things, whether it is from the very first Bible study or now at the second to last Bible study. So here's how it works. Our Bible study in 1 Corinthians was actually inspired by a Bible study that St. John Chrysostom taught when he was a priest in Antioch. This was even before he became patriarch. Somewhere around the year, we think 385 AD. And in Antioch, like ancient Corinth and like modern-day America, Antioch and Corinth were multicultural, highly educated, very wealthy, yet divided communities. And so we gain a lot of insight into living our Christianity even here in contemporary America. So tonight is session 44, homily 43. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, the final chapter. Chapter 16, verses 1 through 9. If you have not yet downloaded the study guide, I invite you to go to my website, liveanewlifeinchrist.org, and go to Bible Studies and scroll down to session 44 for 1 Corinthians. You'll see the study guide. You'll also see a link to the video. Of course, you're already watching it on video, so you already know where the video link is. However, there is a live chat room which is only available while you're watching on YouTube, moderated by my wife, Presbytera Vasi, but you have to be watching on YouTube to participate. So if you are watching it on the website or on Facebook or on X, formerly known as Twitter, or even in your email, go ahead and launch your YouTube application or website, and you'll be able to participate in the live chat. And then if you have a question that Presbytera either cannot answer, although she can answer just about anything, or if she wants to include it in our conversation here, she will grab the microphone out of my hand probably, and she will chime in and ask your question here on our live chat. So it's definitely something worth participating in. Also, you, I believe, saw a commercial when you logged on tonight. I invite you, if you don't want to see commercials anymore, to make a contribution to the Keep Be Transfigured ad-free campaign. You can do that on this video on the donate button, or you can go to my website, liveanewlifeinchrist.org/give, and you may make a contribution to the Keep Be Transfigured ad-free campaign. Our sermons are already ad-free, and we're hoping to make our Bible studies also ad-free, so your generosity and your support would be appreciated. Our ministry does fully function through your generosity and your assistance. You can also leave a super chat here on YouTube and make a contribution that way. All of those go to the Keep Be Transfigured ad-free campaign. Okay, let's see. We talked about the study guide. We talked about the ad campaign. We talked about the live chat. Presbytera, who do we have online tonight? Anybody?
Why, yes, Father. We have Jean and Denise. Denise. No, I was going to say something silly. Denise is thankful for the ministry and wants to thank you very much.
Denise has been with us for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, Denise also participated in our other Bible studies as well. So she's been with us for a long time. She's not a new fan. She's a dedicated fan. So Denise, God bless you for sticking with it. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and say our prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Shine within our hearts, loving Master, the pure light of your divine knowledge, and open the eyes of our minds that we may comprehend the message of your gospel. Instill in us also reverence for your blessed commandments, so that having conquered sinful desires, we may pursue a spiritual life, thinking and doing all those things which are pleasing to you. For you, Christ our God, the light of our souls and bodies, do we give glory, together with our Father, beginning in your all holy, good, and life-creating Spirit, always, now, and forever, and to the ages of ages. Amen. Amen. Okay, so if you're new, let me share with you how the study guide works. You'll see three areas, three groupings, three sections on the study guide. One called text analysis. That is the traditional chapter verse kind of study. Then you will see life application. St. John Chrysostom, almost always, inspired sometimes by one word or one verse, goes and transitions into a moral teaching that I call life application. Because even if we memorize the scriptures, if it somehow does not change the way we live, it is a useless exercise. And then we close every Bible study with a send-off, which is our little way of being inspired by St. John Chrysostom to last until our next Bible study, which is Tuesday next week, our final Bible study in the series, session 45 next week. Okay, do I have a volunteer to read, please? 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 1 through 9. Go ahead, thank you.
Now concerning the collection for the saints, do as I instructed the churches of Galatia. On the first day of the week, each one of you should put aside and save according to God's blessing, so that no collections be made when I come. When I arrive, I will send whoever you approve with letters to carry your gracious gift to Jerusalem. If it is appropriate for me to go also, they will accompany me, but I will come to you when I have passed through Macedonia, since I have to go through Macedonia. I may also stay with you, or even spend the winter, so that you may send me on my journey. Truly, I do not wish to see you only in passing, but I hope to stay with you for a while, if the Lord permits. But I will stay at Ephesus until Pentecost, because a great and effective door is open to me, and there are many adversaries.
All right, so let's just dig right in. Section number 1, and again, if you're new, these section numbers are so you can find these quotes in the homily. There is a link to the free text of the homily available in the study guide. So don't forget to read the homily before next week, the last one. Here we go, section number 1, point number 1. Giving alms is the highest form of good. Chrysostom says this: having completed his discourse concerning doctrines. So remember, last week I mentioned he's beginning to say goodbye now. He's wrapped everything up, so now this is the beginning of his farewell, right? And so Chrysostom says, having finished all of that, having completed his discourse concerning doctrines, and being about to enter upon that which belongs rather to morals, he dismisses everything else and proceeds to the chief of good things, discoursing about alms. Right? So remember, for St. John Chrysostom, alms, taking care of the poor, taking care of the work of the church, is a great thing. How many times has he turned in the homilies, week after week after week, to talking against wealth and against luxury and against all these things, right? So for St. John Chrysostom, alms is the greatest good. And so here now, wrapping things up, about to say goodbye, he says one final thing. Okay, having said all those things, now let's talk about the collection, right? And so just a little parenthesis, there's going to be several comments tonight about stewardship and about giving and about almsgiving. That's not a new topic in the church, as you can see, right? St. Paul was talking about giving. and about supporting the work of the church. So the fact that we pass the collection plate and all that kind of thing and have stewardship, none of that is new in the church. It's coming down from the very beginning, in the very first days. But for St. John Chrysostom, it is the chief of good things, he wrote here. Point number 2. Great good is the result of belief in the resurrection. Listen to what he says here. And observe his consideration. When he had persuaded them concerning the resurrection and made them more earnest, then and not until then, he discusses this point also, right? So there's a link there. Once we believe in the truth of the resurrection and the whole purpose of all this stuff, then our charitable giving makes sense. Then taking care of the poor makes sense. Then contributing to the good of the church and the ministry of the church. Because what is the ministry of the church? It's the ministry of Christ. Right? And why is that possible? Because Christ is risen. Because Christ is, and we are going to be resurrected. And so all of that is what gives us the incentive and purpose behind our charitable giving. Do you see how interconnected that is? It's not just something theological we believe. It is a belief that drives behavior, right? So point number 3. We are urged to do good as part of the whole church. Listen to what Chrysostom says here. As I gave order to the churches in Galatia, so this is now at the beginning of chapter 16, he added this, kindling their emulation by the account, kindling? I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that word. Their emulation by the account of the well-doings of others, and putting it in the form of a narration. And this also he did when writing to the Romans. For to them also, while appearing to narrate the reason why he was going away to Jerusalem, he introduces thereupon his discourse about alms. So he's, look, I'm going there, and Jerusalem, of course, is the headquarters. Right? That's, using today's terminology, it's the mother church. Right? And so St. Paul's saying, look, I'm headed to Jerusalem. What you're going to give to me so I can bring it. Right? So there's that, again, there's also that interconnectivity that we're not just us. We are part of the global church. We are part of a broader perspective. Okay? Point number 4. This, again, something that we forget where it comes from. Sunday is the central day of our faith. Mark how he exhorts them even from the time, for indeed the day was enough to lead them to almsgiving. Wherefore call to mind, says he, what ye attained to on this day. It's okay. Somebody walked into, I saw them.
The door's unlocked?
Yeah, so people can come for Bible study. Wherefore call to mind, says he, what you attain to on this day, how all the unutterable blessings and that which is the root and the beginning of our life took place on this day. So that's the centrality of Sunday, right? Now remember, it's not a scriptural day. It's not the Sabbath. The Sabbath is Saturday. So there's no law in the Jewish temple or anything that says go to church every Sunday. There's not even a law saying go to church in the New Testament, right? That's in that document called Didachiton Apostolon, the teachings of the Holy Apostles. But here, St. Paul is showing the centrality of Sunday and the importance of Sunday, because that's the hub of all good things, because that's when the resurrection took place, and that's when our entire life grids into focus. And that's why later, what do the apostles say? On every Sunday, we should gather, right? And this is the reason, because of that great importance of Sunday. Everything is centralized there. Point number 5. Our house is an extension of the church for doing good. He said not, let them bring it to the church, lest they might feel ashamed because of the smallness of the sum. But having by gradual addition swelled his contribution, let him then produce it. When I have come for the present, lay it up, says he, at home, and make your house a church, your little box a treasury. Become a guardian, sacred wealth, a self-ordained steward of the poor. Right? And so remember, it says, set aside something, store as he may prosper, there may be no collection when I come. So he's saying, your house is not in isolation from the rest of the faith. Right? And it needs to become a place of doing good. It's not just a place of escape. Oh, I'm going home. But he says, make your house into something dedicated to doing good things as well, right? And that's why they're storing the money at the church, at the house, and then bringing it to the church when they're ready, okay? I think it's pretty cool. Point number 6. There is no shame in asking for alms for the poor. If, on the contrary, by the grace of God, we are in nothing troublesome about ourselves, but have made the gospel without charge to you, laboring indeed in no wise like Paul, but being contented with our own, with all boldness of speech I will say, give unto the needy, yea, and I will not leave off saying it, and of those who give not, I will be a severe accuser. Now this is Chrysostom talking here. Right? Chrysostom saying, look, the job of us as Christians is to take care of the poor. I mean, this goes all the way back to Matthew chapter 25, right? This is one of our important callings as Christians. And Chrysostom's like, look, I'm not going to be ashamed of asking for it. Right? We're going to do good things, and I'm not going to stop. And if you don't help us, I'm going to be the accuser. I mean, it's a pretty bold position for the priest. Remember, he's not patriarch at this point. He's just the priest of Antioch. And he's warning them. And if you don't help the poor, I'll be the one calling you out, he says, using today's kind of language. I will be a severe accuser, not just an accuser, but a severe accuser. So, point number 7 on this theme of giving. Each of us is commanded to give according to our prosperity. Again, there's no such thing as my equal share of the budget. This is according to our prosperity. Now observe also how he avoids being burdensome. He says not so much or so much, but as he may prosper, whether much or little. Neither said he what anyone may have gained, but as he may prosper, signifying that the supply is of God. Right? Meaning everything we have is from God, and we need to give based on how we have been blessed. The more we have been blessed, the more we give. There's nothing in that says make sure everyone gives $1. Make sure everyone gives $10. Right? And that's one of the things you see in the modern church, this temptation of saying, oh, if every family gave $100 or $1,000 or $5,000, then our budget would be met. But that's not what the church teaches. That's not what St. Paul taught. It's not what St. John Chrysostom taught, right? It's how we may prosper. And so the more we prosper, the more we should be giving, as opposed to our equal share of what the expenses are for the church. Right? So this is all about our giving tonight. And this is very important for St. John Chrysostom. So we can see an ancient model of a stewardship program too. Right? All the way back from St. Paul and then from St. John Chrysostom.
Can I ask?
Yep.
How did we end up moving so far from this understanding of tithing? What do you know what could have what historically put us in the position where we should give a certain minimum amount as opposed to a percentage? Because lots of things that we've carried over, that we found in America, came from more like the Protestant churches that became Orthodox, but even the Protestants tithe. So how is it that we lost that part and we became a give us $250 minimum and then you're a member of the church?
I think the answer is pretty basic. First, St. Paul and St. John Chrysostom are not talking about giving for the sake of the operations of the church. They're not talking about, of course they didn't have them, they're not talking about electric bills and insurance bills and all that kind of thing. They're talking about the work of the church, not the keep the doors open expenses that we think about in today's modern church. Right? So the first answer is that when St. Paul says give to the church, he's talking about what the church was doing with the resources, which was taking care of people. Right? Sending the missionaries on and sending this and sending that. It wasn't paying, because how were the churches built? We know this is historically true. The wealthy people were providing the churches. The churches were not being built by the average person. They were being built either by the royalty or by the wealthy members of the community. They'd build the church. In fact, St. John Chrysostom, not in 1 Corinthians, but there's another homily, I don't remember which one it was. St. John Chrysostom actually talks about the people who build churches get a special blessing from God. Because if you build a church, because of your gift to a community, that community has a priest and a church and the sacraments and the blessings from God. So the builders of churches, which throughout history have been the wealthy, they receive a special blessing from God because they brought Christ present to a particular community. Right? So that ancient understanding of giving is not the cost of keeping the church open. It's the necessary work of the church, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and stuff like that. The modern church, when it comes to America, at least from Greece we'll talk about, right? So that's our community is from the Greek history, right? In Greece, the basic expenses of the church were for many years the responsibility of the government. Okay, whether it was the kingdom or the empire or the parliament in Greece, taxes, right? Prior to Greeks coming here, the actual keep the church open expenses were the responsibility of that government, whether it was a king or whatever was paying to keep the church going. We get to America, and that's where the whole what's your share of keeping things going comes from. Because we came to America and there was nobody paying the electric bill. There was nobody paying the utility, the water bill or the insurance bill or whatever. And so next thing you know, yeah, rich people were building the churches still, but now in modern day America, you've got all these other expenses that are coming into play. And that's where they began equally dividing them up. Because it was a foreign thing. Nobody had to worry about keeping the doors open in Greece, because that was being done through the government.
And probably because the people came before the priests.
Right, and so what happened was, in most of the churches in America, it was a Greek community first, and then sent for a priest. So it didn't come spreading through evangelism. The Greeks, like here in Tarpon Springs, they were here first, and then they sent for a priest, and then they built a church. Now, in our case, our cathedral was not built by wealthy people. It was built literally dollar for dollar for every sponge that was harvested. Every sponge captain, every sponge boat, as soon as they sold their level of sponges, a percent of it went straight to building the new church. Right, the cathedral that stands today. So that's a rare example. It wasn't built by one or two, very wealthy individuals. But for the most part in history, that's where it comes from. And so that's why the idea of funding the daily operations of your church is not necessarily something that we as Orthodox, because in the old country it was always The Tsar in Russia paid the bills. The Byzantine Emperor paid the bills. He made sure the priest had food, and he made sure all this, and he made sure all that. But the work of the church, taking care of the people, is what the people's money was supporting. And technically the operations too, because as St. Paul says, the clergy were eating from that. Right? So the clergy have always been included as part of the basic necessities. That way they were available to tend to the poor rather than, having to go out and get a job and feeding themselves. Does that make sense?
Yes. Denise says that's awesome.
Oh, thank you, Denise. I don't know what part of awesome that is, but I'll take it. Okay. Point number 8. Setting aside a little each Sunday makes a greater gift possible. Now that's just math, right? But it's amazing how even back then, people were like, look, if you give a little bit, you actually can give more. Listen to what Chrysostom says. And not only so, but also by his not enjoining to deposit all at once, he makes his counsel easy, since the gathering little by little hinders all perception of the burden and the cost. I love how, even then, the church reminding people that, look, if you just take your time, little by little, and regularly, don't wait. The more often, the easier it is.
Fasuli be fasuli.
Yes, one bean by bean, our bag is full. It's an old Greek saying.
Denise liked the whole sponge per.
Oh, yes, that's a very great history for our church here. All right, point number 9. The church elects leaders to be entrusted with our contribution. Now this is really fantastic. It's taking the way St. Paul talks about it and directly teaching us today in the 21st century on how to manage our contributions to the church. Listen to what he says. Wherefore to them he leaves the right of voting in the choice of those who are able to convey it. He is far enough from saying the payment is yours, but the privilege of selecting those who are to carry it is not yours. In other words, the community chooses the overseers of the money, right? It wasn't that St. Paul saying, just give it all to me, I'll take care of it. You pick somebody, and they're going to take it with me, and together we're going to go and bring it to Jerusalem. Right? So what's that teaching us today is we should not be, how do I want to say this, putting restrictions on the way we give to the church. In our case, modern day church, we elect parish councils, and it is their job to manage the monies of the church. Our job is to be generous. Our job is to take from our prosperity. Our job is to give every Sunday. Our job is to give. Their job is to manage. And we're the ones who choose the managers, right? And so that's, even from back when St. Paul, that's the way that the church is saying, look, there's this mutual cooperation going on here. He's not just saying, give it to me and I'll do whatever I want with it. He's letting them choose the people who are going to manage it on the way. I think it's a pretty important distinction, right? Because a lot of people, because they don't necessarily trust managers, like to give restrictions with their donations, right? For example, we have people here who say, I'm going to give you, but only if you use it for this. I'm going to give, but only if you use it for this. Now, all those things have needs. It's not like they're selecting things that don't have needs. But we have to find a way to bring it to the other level, saying, look, we have managers who have been elected by the community. In our case, we call them the parish council. Let them, their responsibility is to manage those funds that we have freely given to the church. Next point. Point number 10. St. Paul desires, so now we're moving beyond just giving. St. Paul desires to spend time with them, not merely to pass through. For I do not at all wish to take you merely in my way, but to continue among you and spend some time. He's reassuring them that he wants actually to be with them in the case that he just, of course, he just finished talking about money here, but he doesn't want them to think he's just going to pass right on through and say hello and bye-bye. He goes, look, until I can actually spend some time, I'm not coming. It's his way of saying, you're more important than me just passing through. Okay. And that shows his love for the community. It shows his willingness to say, you're more to me than just, waving from the side of the road kind of thing, right? We see that, in the news all the time. The president's motorcade goes by and they're waving at everybody as they drive by, right? Oh, I saw the president. Well, the president just driving by. He's not even spending time with us, right? St. Paul saying, no, I actually want to come and spend time with you. I want to be with you. I want to live with you for a period of time. Yeah.
For like, let's say a season or something, and just go from community to community?
Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. And then he would say, then you're going to send me on my way. And he'd go from community to community. Now, there were times he just passed through, but he's saying here, I don't want to just pass through. I want to come when I can spend some time, right? Okay. Next point. Yeah.
Have a home base of operations, like Rome or Jerusalem or something like that? Or was he just constantly on the move?
That's a good question. I mean, the end of his life was from Rome when he was in prison. That's why some of these are called the prison epistles. While he was in jail, he was writing some of these epistles too. Not this one, but not necessarily a home base. I mean, Jerusalem was the home base of the church, and he came back to Jerusalem several times. I don't know if the EOB has those maps. Like the Orthodox Study Bible has like these St. Paul's maps and stuff where he's different journeys. So in that case, he kept coming back to Jerusalem. But it wasn't like he went to Corinth, back to Jerusalem, Rome, back to Jerusalem. Not in that case of a home base. He'd go place to place to place to place to place, and then back, and then do another loop, so to speak. Point number 11. The devil fights hardest when the gospel is taking root. And herewith also he cheered them up, namely by saying that henceforth the word works everywhere and springs up readily. And if there be many who plot against it, this also is a sign of the advance of the gospel. For at no time does the evil demon wax fierce, except on seeing his goods made spoil of abundantly. Now, on the surface, this is good news. It's very tempting to say, I must be doing something great to have so much temptation from the devil. Because that means if I'm not following Christ, why should the devil just leaves me alone? Because I'm not gaining anything. And that's true. The more we try and follow Christ, the more the devil works against us. The danger in that mentality, and this is not what Chrysostom is saying here, but I'm going to add it. The danger of that mentality is to say, every time I'm struggling, it's because I'm trying to follow Christ and the devil is working against me. Sometimes I'm struggling because I'm making the wrong choices. Right? So we have to be careful to automatically presume that our struggle is because we're on the right track and the devil's trying to derail us. Sometimes our struggle is in fact because we're on the wrong track.
And that's why we need a spiritual father.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Discern those things.
the spiritual father helps a great deal in discerning that. But that's why I always add that here, because it's very tempting to presume, oh, I must be doing great things because my life is so miserable, the devil keeps working against me. Well, maybe our life's miserable because we're making a bunch of bad choices, in which case it's not the devil at all, it's the fault of our own. One of the you know those church sign memes where you see these church signs? Well, I actually saw a real sign one time that said, sometimes life is just difficult. Meaning, there's no ulterior motive. Sometimes it's just what it is. You know, and that's kind of is a burst of our bubble, so to speak, because we like to think, oh, if I'm struggling, it's because I must be doing everything so fantastic, the devil's trying to derail me. And in this case, I mean, it's what Chrysostom is saying. The devil definitely works harder when the gospel is working, but that doesn't mean that all struggle is due to the fact that we're following the gospel. Does that make sense? Am I saying that the right way? Sometimes I confuse myself, believe it or not. Okay, moving on to our life application. Work hard for your reward from God. Here's the first one. Every good result requires a struggle. Let us then, when we desire to effect anything great and noble, not regard this, the greatest of the labor which it brings, but let us rather look to the gain. Right? So every good result requires a struggle. There's other ways of saying this, right? Every good thing requires hard work.
Goes unpunished.
That's a different saying. That's a different saying. Okay? But suffice it to say, if we want something good, we're going to have to work for it. That's basically what we're saying here. Point number 13. Falling to temptation is a natural result of fighting the devil. This is something I think should be a comfort to all of us. Do thou then, for your part, when you see anyone doing alms and performing numberless other good works, and so curtailing the power of the devil, and then falling into temptation and perils, be not troubled thereupon. This is the very reason why he fell into temptation, because he mightily smote the devil. To me, that's comforting. Because again, the more we're working, we're going to be tempted. Okay? And it's also reminding us, when we see people who are otherwise good falling to temptation and having some poor moral choices, Chrysostom is saying here, don't be surprised. They're fighting the devil. Of course they're going to fall. Of course we're going to fall. I think that's why I'm so comforted by this, because it helps us not see the moral failings of our fellow human beings as scandalous, right?
And it's not a fair fight.
What do you mean?
Is it on now? Is that the devil has been deceiving. It's not a fair fight because the devil has been deceiving people longer than an individual has been able to fight him. For example, the devil's been fighting people for 1 billion years, and I've only lived 50-something. So he's like a master at it compared to my ability to fight him. And it's really is a very, you could almost see that like an uphill battle, but we just have to cut ourselves some slack and move towards forgiveness when dealing with the devil.
I think that's why I get so comforted by it.
Right.
Because it does help us cut each other some slack. Okay? And also realizing that when you're fighting the devil, it's a constant battle that doesn't end. And so sometimes you just, in your exhaustion, this is what Chrysostom was saying if you go back and read the homily, in your exhaustion, you're going to fall to temptation, right? You can't always win every single battle. And that's why I think for me it's so comforting. Okay, point number 3. Or point number 14 on the study guide. We receive a greater reward from God when we do good in the face of struggle. For it is a great thing, even when our affairs are flowing on prosperously, to show mercy and to adhere to virtue. But it is far greater in grievous calamity not to desist from this noble occupation. This is he who may be most truly said to do so for God's sake. So then, though we be in peril, beloved, though we suffer ever so greatly, let us with the greater zeal apply ourselves to our labors for virtue's sake. I mean, look, Christ said something similar when he said, if you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? That's the easy thing. It's easy to be generous when things are going great. Right? That's what Chrysostom is saying here. It's when things aren't going so great for us, and still we're generous, now we're actually gaining something. Now we're actually living a virtuous life. Right? We're not letting our struggles hinder our good work. Right? And again, all this stuff is reminding us that we have work to do. Right? Our work isn't how many prostrations we're doing. Work is not, did we read all the necessary food labels for our fasting? That's not our work. That's our discipline. That's our exercise. The work is taking care of people and loving people and forgiving people. That's the real work that we're called to do. And when we can do that, even in our struggling moments, now we're living a life of virtue. That's what St. John Chrysostom is telling us. I think it's a pretty important distinction. Go ahead.
I found myself, when people ask me how I'm doing, I'll say, I'm in the black. My struggles aren't as many as my blessings, so I'm doing okay.
I like that. I'm in the black. I think I'm going to remember that one. All right, next point. Don't expect rewards here, expect them in heaven. Let us then not seek for our return here. Let us not become poor and needy, since surely it is of extreme meanness when heaven is proposed, and things which are above the heaven, to be looking round on the things which are here. It's like, hello? And this is one thing that the so-called prosperity gospel misses drastically. The prosperity gospel, like Joel Osteen and that kind of baloney that goes on, where they teach the more you love God, the more now that you are blessed. And they'll quote Christ saying that they may have life more abundantly. And people like Joel Osteen in the prosperity gospel say that more abundantly refers to earthly blessings. But it's not. More abundantly means this free life, this peaceful life, abundantly in the grace of God, does not necessarily mean wealth. Does not necessarily mean worldly comforts. And Chrysostom's point here is how offensive when we're looking and our goal is heaven, and yet we're looking around for our rewards now. Right? He didn't say it here, but it's almost like, you're running a race and you're only halfway through the course and you're looking for the reward money. You haven't even finished the race yet. Why are you looking for the money, right? This is what kind of Chrysostom is kind of saying here. But we do it. We think, right? You say, no good deed goes unpunished. Right? We say it so naturally. I'm doing this. I'm following all the rules. Why are things not going the way I want them to go? We're focusing on the wrong thing. Don't look for the rewards here. Expect them in heaven. Next point. Here we go. Prayer is of no value if we ignore the poor. And let us make a little chest for the poor at home, and near the place at which you stand praying, and let it be put. There let it be put. And as often as you enter in to pray, first deposit your alms, and then send up your prayer. And as you would not wish to pray with unwashed hands, so neither do so without alms. since not even the gospel hanging by our bed is more important than that alms should be laid up for you. For if you hang up the gospel and do nothing, it will do you no such great good. Whew. So you put a little box there on your altar, and you put your alms there. And when you're saying your prayers, you put your alms there. And then you wake up Sunday morning, you open it up and bring it to church. That's what he's talking about. Linking our giving to our prayers. I think it's a beautiful connection there. Next point. Now we're back to more specifics about our giving and our, what we'd call today our stewardship. Give the first fruits to God after you are paid. Listen to what Chrysostom says here. Again, this is not a new conversation in the church by any means. This is the year 385. Will you have mention also of the resources out of which you should make your deposits, so as in this respect also to make this kind of contribution easy? The handicraft man, for instance, the saddle maker, or the leather cutter, or the brass founder, or any other artificer, when he sells any article of his trade, let him give the first fruits of its price unto God. Let him cast in a small portion here, and assign something to God out of his portion, though it be rather scanty. Right? There should be no confusion, right? That we're talking about every paycheck, using today's terminology. Every paycheck we should be setting aside something for the church. Because what we're give to the church for the work of the church. Not for the electric bills, but so that the work of the church is continuing. Taking care of the poor and all that kind of thing, right? Every time they sold something, set it aside. Right? And so this is where we've lost that connection, because we were so wrapped up in what's the electric bill, what's the insurance premium, oh, my share of that is $300. Doesn't matter what my share of that is. When I sell something, I set aside something for the work of God. That's the key to being a steward of the church. And then we wrap it up with the tithe, presbytera. Where did we get rid of the tithe? Remember, this is in the year 385 AD. Give at least 10% to the church for God's work. Listen to what Chrysostom says here. And this I say not as laying down a law, neither as forbidding more, but as recommending a deposit of not less than a 10th part. And this also do thou practice, not in selling only, but also in buying and receiving a recompense. Let those also who possess land observe this law in regard to their rents. Yea, let it be a law for all who gather their incomes in an honest way.
In an honest way.
I love that he adds that there, right? But there is no doubt about the ancient church taught tithing. This is St. John Chrysostom in 385 in Antioch. At least, he says, not less than a 10th part. Not a maximum, not less than. And so in these last 2 points put together, what does he say? Every time we get paid, we should be setting aside at least 10% and bringing it to the church for the work of the church, right? Now, I think that's pretty bold in the sense that, remember, let's go back to where Chrysostom started here. All this talk of giving, what is it a result of? Believing in the resurrection. Believing that we will be resurrected. Believing that in our resurrection, we're going to be held to account. After that is when St. Paul brings in the idea of giving. And now this is when Chrysostom says, no less than 10%. right? And so this, and he's not talking about as compared to somebody else and as compared to our share. He's talking based on how we are blessed through our prosperity, right? I think it's a pretty clear indication, Presbytera, of where the ancient church used to be. Now keep in mind, Chrysostom is preaching in the middle of the Byzantine Empire. This is 385. It is already a state church. It's already being operationally funded by the emperor. So the tithing here was not to pay the priest's salary or whatever. It was to do the work of the church. And so a real giving program is not about the budget. It's about our love for God and our desire to help other people. Now, unfortunately, it becomes difficult in our contemporary American situation because the church, unfortunately, has become so preoccupied with its own existence in terms of expenses. We have forgotten that our stewardship is for the work of the church, as opposed to keeping the doors open, as we say in modern language.
Just to add on to that, not only is the work for the work of the church, but the church is not the charity. The church offers charity. A lot of people see the church as a charity instead of a place that offers charity, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. The church is a charity too, Father. No, only in the case of the IRS. Meaning whatever we give to the church is tax deductible. That's the only way we should be considering the church a charity. The church is the manager of our giving, not the beneficiary of our giving. And imagine how the world would be so different if we changed that perspective a little bit, right? By the way, if you're watching, Be Transfigured does tithe all our contributions to our host parish. I don't always mention that to our givers. So every year, Be Transfigured gives 10% to our host parish as a continuation of the ministry. So everything we receive as Be Transfigured Ministries, we give 10% to St. Nicholas Cathedral. That's our host parish. So we maintain, we practice what we preach here at Be Transfigured. Okay, Priscilla, before we move on to the send-off, any questions from the online group?
Just a song.
No song yet. Denise, you're going to have to wait for the song. We still have one more point to make. Okay, here's our send-off. Here we go. Tithing leads us to despise wealth and obtain peace in heaven. Yea, and if we establish ourselves in this kind of habit, we are ever after stung by our conscience if ever we omit this rule. And after a while, we shall not even think it a hard thing. And by degrees, we shall arrive at the greater things. And by practicing how to despise wealth, and by pulling up the root of evils, we shall both pass the present life in peace and obtain the life to come. Ultimately, that's the benefit we receive from tithing. It's breaking our love affair with wealth, right? And that's why God gave us the commandment of the tithe, so that we learn to trust Him and love Him instead of loving our money. Okay? So, a pretty powerful lesson on giving tonight from St. John Chrysostom. All of it because of the resurrection. Because we too are going to find ourselves resurrected in front of Christ. And now you can cue the do-de-do music. All right. Remember, next week is our series finale, our final episode, our final session in our Bible study in 1 Corinthians. Till next week, God bless you, and don't forget to live a new life in Christ.
Christ our God, revealing thy glory to thy disciples as far as they could bear it.
Be Transfigured is a production of Be Transfigured Ministries in cooperation with the St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Tarpon Springs, Florida. We depend upon your generosity to maintain our ministry. You can make a safe online donation when you visit our website, liveanewlifeinchrist.org.